Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. Indian occupation forces have martyred 3 civilians in the Shopian district of occupied Kashmir. The youth were killed during a cordon and search operation in the Budgam area of the district. At a meeting in Rawalpindi, the Russian presidential envoy and Pakistan's Army Chief General Javed Bajwa have discussed the recent developments in the Afghan peace process. According to the military's media wing, Zamir Kabulov acknowledged Pakistan's efforts for the peace process. The Army chief said peace in Pakistan and Afghanistan will benefit the entire region. In Myanmar, a young woman has become the first protester to die in the anti-coup demonstrations after being shot in the head. She was injured last week when police tried to disperse protesters in Naypyidaw using water cannon, rubber bullets, and live rounds. Japan has detected 93 cases of a new mutation of the UK variant of the coronavirus. Meanwhile, Brazil has surpassed 10 million cases since the pandemic began, with 243,000 deaths. Here in Pakistan, health authorities have reported 1,200 infections and 40 fatalities in the last 24 hours. Nationwide, the death toll has risen to 12,527. Globally, there are 2.4 million fatalities and more than 110 million cases. NASA's science rover Perseverance has streaked through the Martian atmosphere and made a historic landing on the red planet. The lead guidance and operations specialist of the mission, Swati Mohan, confirmed the touchdown. The robotic vehicle sailed through space for nearly 7 months, covering 472 million kilometers before landing. And in tennis, Daniil Medvedev beat Stefanos Tsitsipas in straight sets in the second semi-final of the Australian Open. He will now face Novak Djokovic in the final on Sunday. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now for the news in more detail. Indian occupation forces have martyred 3 civilians in the Shopian district of occupied Kashmir. The youth were killed during a cordon and search operation in the Budgam area of the district. Police say the search operation is still underway in the district. All internet and mobile communication is shut in the region. Indian occupying forces have killed over 300 Kashmiris over the past 12 months in extrajudicial murders and fake encounters. Moving on, Russian presidential envoy to Afghanistan, Zamir Kabulov, has called on Pakistan's Army Chief General Javed Bajwa in Rawalpindi. The military's media wing said the 2 officials discussed regional security situation and the recent developments in the Afghan peace process. The Army Chief said peace in Pakistan and Afghanistan is in the greater interest of the region. The Russian envoy lauded Pakistan's positive role in the Afghan peace process. And China says 4 of its soldiers died during a bloody Himalayan border clash with Indian troops in June last year. Reaffirming that the responsibility falls on India, Beijing said they were fighting foreign troops who crossed into the Chinese border. China's military news outlet PLA Daily revealed the names of the fallen soldiers, calling their acts heroic. A total of 20 Indian soldiers had died in the skirmish. The clashes took place in the Galwan Valley after Indian troops attempted to capture the territory claimed by Beijing. The conflict marked the worst border clash between the 2 countries in nearly 45 years. In India, agitating farmers have launched a hunger strike due to a shortage of water at the Mohangarh Canal area in Jaisalmer. The farmers said more will join the agitation today and said that their crops are getting ruined. Meanwhile, farmer leader Rakesh Tikait slammed the government, saying the Narendra Modi government thought the movement will die down in 2 months, but he said it will only grow stronger and warned to take the protest to Kolkata beyond the national capital. Meanwhile, a hearing over climate activist Disha Ravi's plea has begun in the Delhi High Court over police leaks to the media. Ravi was arrested in connection with a toolkit shared online by Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg. Meanwhile, a young woman has become the first protester to die in the anti-coup demonstrations in Myanmar. Maya Thwate Kaing was hit by a bullet at a protest in Naypyidaw last week. Meanwhile, opponents of the military coup have welcomed new sanctions from the UK and Canada on ruling generals. A small group of protesters gathered outside the British embassy in Yangon to express gratitude for the support. Protesters are set to take the streets for what will mark 2 weeks of daily demonstrations in the country. The Assistance Association for Political Prisoners said some 495 civilians have been arrested since the military takeover on February 1st. And the U.S. has reaffirmed its strategic defense partnership with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. In a phone call, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin discussed policy matters with the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. In a statement, the Department of Defense said Austin reiterated the recent changes in U.S. policy towards the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen. The statement read, both leaders agreed on the importance of ending the war in Yemen. The two also discussed countering what they call Iran's destabilizing activities in the region. Earlier, foreign ministers of France, Germany, UK, and the U.S. stressed the urgency of ending the war in Yemen. And the United says it is ready to negotiate with Iran about returning to the 2015 nuclear deal. In a statement, a U.S. State Department spokesperson said the U.S. will accept an EU invitation for talks with Iran and the 5 other countries.
The foreign ministers of France, Germany, the United Kingdom, and the United States held a virtual meeting for the second time to discuss Iran and other issues. In a joint statement, the participants expressed interest in ensuring that Iran never develops a nuclear weapon. The ministers affirmed their shared objective of Iran's return to full compliance with its commitments under the JCPOA. The E3 and the United States called on Iran not to take any additional steps, in particular, any limitations on IAEA verification activities. Responding to the statement, Iran's foreign minister, Mohammad Javad Zarif, said Washington should make the first move. In a tweet, Zarif said Iran's remedial measures are a response to the United States and European violations. He added that the 4 countries should remove the cause if they fear the effect.
And NASA's science rover Perseverance has streaked through the Martian atmosphere and made a historic landing on the red planet. The lead guidance and operations specialist of the mission, Swati Mohan, confirmed the touchdown. In a tweet, the mission said the spacecraft immediately sent back its first images of the landing site. The robotic vehicle sailed through space for nearly 7 months, covering 472 million kilometers before landing. Perseverance is NASA's 9th landing mission on Mars and the agency's 5th rover. It is the most advanced astrobiology laboratory sent to another planet in a search for traces of ancient microbial life. Moving on, Japan has detected 93 cases of a new mutation of the UK variant of the coronavirus. Globally, there are 2.4 million fatalities and more than 110 million cases. More on the pandemic in this report.
Stronger and stronger new variants of the coronavirus discovered every few weeks are putting to test the planet's ability to fight and defeat the pandemic. The most recent of these is another mutant of the already more lethal UK variant. And after Pfizer, the Moderna vaccine has also shown weaker protection against the South African variant, with the antibody level reduced by as much as 6-fold. United States President Joe Biden will pledge $4 billion to the global COVAX program to encourage contributions from other governments. Down south, Brazil has passed 10 million cases, while a new variant threatens to further ravage the country as it runs out of vaccine doses.
The delay in vaccinations also favors the development and circulation of COVID variants that could be more dangerous and which could be more dominant than the original virus through a selection mechanism for infections.
Non-equitable distribution of vaccine continues to draw criticism. A report by anti-poverty campaigners say rich countries are said to have 1 billion more doses than they need, leaving poorer nations scrambling for leftover supplies. Meanwhile, in Europe, Ireland has extended restrictions as the dominant UK variant takes over the country. The new variants have been spreading into Spain too, with 7 cases of the South African, 3 of the Brazil, and a high percentage of the United Kingdom strain in all new cases. French authorities have also capped the number of public attending the summer festivals at 5,000. Meanwhile, Hungarian officials say China's Sinopharm vaccine is efficacious and safe.
If we are evaluating a drug or a vaccine, we are evaluating 3 main things: quality, the efficacy, and the safety. What we can see here with the Chinese Sinopharm vaccine is that the quality documentation was okay. The phase 3 clinical trial, the interim report of the phase 3 clinical trial was absolutely satisfactory. I can say that yes, this vaccine is efficacious and a safe vaccine.
Pfizer is now planning to test a booster shot version of its vaccine, specifically targeted for the highly contagious South African variant.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, COVID-19 has claimed another 40 lives in the past 24 hours. This has pushed the death toll to 12,527. The health ministry says over 1,200 tested positive for the virus overnight. The number of active COVID-19 cases in the country has dropped to 24,000. The ministry said 568,000 people contracted the virus so far, of which nearly 532,000 have recovered. It said currently just over 2,000 patients are being treated in the hospitals across the country. More stories after a short break. Stay with us. We're back. In Somalia, a gunfight has broken out as the government forces and opposition supporters clashed in the capital city of Mogadishu. This comes after Somali forces sealed off streets to prevent a protest over delayed elections. Meanwhile, Somalia's former president, Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, said the government forces attacked the hotel where he was staying. Earlier in a tweet, Mohammed called on civilians to come out to join protests in Benadir region. He said the outgoing president is shedding the blood of citizens who are preparing for a peaceful protest to express their views. Somalia's Minister of Security, Hassan Hunduboy Jamali, accused the opposition of starting the fighting. In a statement, Jamali said armed militia attacked government forces who repulsed and overpowered the militias. And Algeria's president has dissolved the lower house of parliament and called for early legislative elections. In a televised address, President Abdelmajid Tebboune said a government reshuffle will take place within 48 hours. He said the dissolution was part of reforms after amendments to the constitution in November to give more powers to parliament. Tebboune also ordered the release of 60 detainees of a protest movement that forced his predecessor out of power in 2019. The current lawmakers of the lower house were elected for 5 years in May 2017. And in Spain, police and protesters have clashed for a third night against the jailing of a Catalan rapper, Pablo Hasél. His tweets and lyrics often attack the monarchy and the police. The protesters threw stones at riot police and set fire to barricades. Police responded by firing tear gas and baton charging the protesters. Hasél was arrested on Tuesday to serve a 9-month sentence in a highly contentious free speech case. His detention sparked demonstrations across Catalonia in which a woman lost an eye during clashes with Barcelona police. Over 50 people have been arrested across the country, with 55 injured, including 35 police officers. Moving on, the U.S. has imposed visa restrictions on 43 Belarusians, accusing them of undermining democracy in Belarus. Those sanctions include high-ranking justice officials and other government personnel. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the U.S. remains alarmed by President Alexander Lukashenko's crackdown on pro-democracy activists. In a statement, Blinken said Washington supports international efforts to independently probe electoral irregularities in Belarus. He said the human rights abuses surrounding the election and the crackdown that has followed should also be probed. The secretary said the U.S. stands with the brave people of Belarus and supports their right to free and fair elections. This comes after a court in Belarus sentenced 2 local journalists to 2 years in prison for filming protests against Lukashenko. Malaysia's highest court has fined a news portal over comments posted by readers deemed offensive to the judiciary. The Attorney General filed an application to cite Malaysia Kini for contempt last year. In a 6-1 decision, a federal court panel found the outlet fully responsible for publishing the comments. The fine was more than double the amount sought by prosecutors, though the court cleared Editor-in-Chief Stephen Gan of any offense. Talking to the media after the decision, Gan said he was very disappointed. The editor maintained that his outlet could not be held responsible for the comments of readers. The outlet has since launched a crowdfunding appeal to cover the penalty. And natural disasters have been one of the biggest destroyers of heritage across the globe. A historic snowstorm damaged 500,000 trees in Madrid in January. But now a specialist arboreal rescue team is swooping in to clone some of the most valuable specimens. More in this report.
Storm Filomena crashed through central Spain in January, cutting off transport links to Madrid and causing damages worth millions. Francisco Molina, head of agroforestry at Madrid's MYANMAR Institute, described it as the biggest environmental catastrophe of recent years. The institute has been cataloguing and cloning Madrid's noteworthy trees for 10 years.
We are collecting stakes from the century-old oak that fell due to ecological disaster caused by Storm Filomena. We are collecting stakes to take them through a cloning process to get genetically identical offspring from the fallen tree.
So far, MYANMAR has received requests from 30 local authorities to clone more than 100 species, including corks and home oaks. The evergreen oaks sustain the country's famed acorn-fed pigs, but their broad leaves make them vulnerable to heavy snow. Complicating the cloning effort, they are incapable of reproducing via a simple transplant.
We thoroughly clean the stacks at the lab, and we apply a fungicide to later place them into an inert substratum with water. This chamber has high relative humidity because we want it to achieve epicormic sprouts to collect these small 1.5 centimeter leaves in order to cultivate them to induce the formation of acorn seeds formed from these leaves.
It will take decades to replace the losses, but it is worthwhile to preserve the genes of trees that have withstood a century of climate change.
And now for the latest in business. Stocks in the Asia Pacific are trading mixed following overnight declines for the major indices on Wall Street. Australia's ASX 200 is leading the losses, dropping close to 1.5%. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 and the Topix Index too have dipped almost 1%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng has also slipped marginally. However, mainland Chinese shares in South Korea's Kospi have gained more than 0.5%. And moving on, the U.S. state of Texas continues to grapple with the fallout of a winter storm that has paralyzed daily life. Texas Governor Greg Abbott says power plants are back online, but many households remain without power because of down supply lines. Some 2.7 million Texas households are without heat. Leaders warn of a domino effect on infrastructure as water supplies remain down. The weather has strained the ability of hospitals to treat COVID-19 patients and isolated vulnerable communities which are cut off by frozen roads. White House Homeland Security Advisor Liz Sherwood Randall has called the storm a type of extreme weather event triggered by climate change. Amid the crisis, Senator Ted Cruz faced condemnation on social media for taking a vacation to sunny Mexico. Arriving back in Houston after criticism, Cruz said his trip had been a mistake and was taken to please his daughters. And now it's time to take a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.